community. And, and that's a problem.
Other journalists, such as Cheryl Atkinson, a former CBS News correspondent, have mentioned the same thing. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Your story begins here. Start yours today. Wind River Resort and Casino can make your dreams a reality. From our experienced staff, full setup and cleanup, on-site catering, full-service spa, luxurious hotel, and certified wedding and event planner. Come see what we have to offer. We guarantee you'll be amazed. Our group sales team can set up any room arrangement needed to suit your conference or meeting needs. Book your event today. Call 530-339-7454 or visit windriver.com. It's better at the river. Do you like to perform and show off your skills and vocals and sing your best? Then head down to Wind River Resort and Casino for karaoke rewards at Overtime Lounge. No cover charge. The action starts every Thursday at 9 p.m. with more ways to earn entries to win a package including a one-night hotel stay, dining certificate, free slot play, and cash. Drawing at the end of the month. Ask how to earn additional tickets. Karaoke rewards Thursdays at Wind River Resort and Casino. For rules and details, log on to windriver.com. Karaoke is better at the river.
The views and opinions of shows on KCNR are those of the hosts, guests, and callers only, and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff, management, or advertisers of KCNR Radio.
Hello, my darlings. Welcome back to Radio Wasteland. I am your host. I don't know. I was thinking about trying to find some sort of fancy adjective to put there. I am your host, Chauncey Haworth, and this is my sidekick, Sean.
Hello.
All right. So, tonight is our show about... we have a guest on, Craig Owens from Bizarre LA, the curator for BizarreLA.com, and he's written a book, Haunted by History. And he is basically into history, the paranormal, and photography. And his book, Haunted by History, is sort of a collection of all of the above.
That's a good combination. If he was into history, paranormal, and dentistry, you'd have a hard time making that work.
It sounds absolutely terrifying, I have to admit.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, other than Doc Holliday and maybe some crazy serial killer, I'm not sure where to go with that one. But, I was actually born in Los Angeles. I am a transplant from Los Angeles to Redding, and I love Los Angeles. I know it's not a popular thing to say for the right-wingers, but don't worry, the topic is going to be mostly about dead people in Los Angeles, so if you are on the right wing, you might enjoy yourself.
Right-wingers don't listen to us. Or
do
they?
I
don't think they do.
I don't think there's really any radio metrics. I don't really know if anybody's out there. So I'm basically, talking to you.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I love Los Angeles, of course, on a nostalgic level, but also because, when I think about hauntings and ghosts and you think about history and the amount of people who have been in a specific area and how long they've been there, this is a question that I've never really gotten an answer to from somebody. Does every person leave a ghost or a residence, or is it just some that don't pass on?
Yeah.
So you would assume that in a place like Los Angeles, there would be a
lot of ghosts.
Ton of, upset.
Now, see, from reading stuff on Spirit's website, the Spirit people we had that other time, and
Melissa
from
Lockett.
our conversations with them. And, they seem as knowledgeable as a person could really be about these things.
Their own admission, they're trying to figure it out as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They didn't say anything explicit, but the vibe I kind of got from reading it was that, maybe a lot of people leave spirits, but most of them only last a couple of days or, something like that.
I see, as the resonance.
They kind of dissipate. And it's only the really nasty ones in many cases that stick around.
Yeah, well, there's this cool old movie, Nigel Neal, I think. He made the Quatermass series in England, and this movie's called The Stone Tape. And, like, it's really not about a ghost, but it's about the idea that if something horrific happens in a place, its experience can be etched onto the surroundings kind of like a record. And that as life or wind or something passes through the area, it can really sort of play back the experience. So it was really kind of an interesting scientific take on the paranormal. But
it does seem like a lot of ghost stories I've heard of begin with, some tragedy that happened in this place.
Right.
And then but that can take a bunch of different forms. It can be like, oh, this grave was disturbed. There was this person resting peacefully, and now there is a ghost because the grave was disturbed. Or, a murder happened in this house or something.
Yeah, but the first one implies that they're laying there throughout all of it,
Exactly. Well, maybe their ghost is sleeping or it crosses over back from wherever it was. Who knows? But
It felt a disturbance in the, like somebody unmade its bed.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I definitely love Los Angeles. A lot of great memories for me there. One of my favorite movies, although not horrific at all, is L.A. Story. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but great Steve Martin movie.
Call in if you've seen L.A. Story. We'll just talk about that.
Well, there's lots of romance towards people's cities. Lots of people feel this way, and they love their city. And I feel like Craig really loves his city that he's in, and at least enough to want to know more about it, So do you have these feelings towards Reading? Do you want to find out all that Reading has to offer? What secret nooks and crannies may be out there?
Honestly, if I were to discover that there were like a bunch of scythe-wielding zombie hillbillies in the Iron Mountain mine or something, and, they're just living in there, I would be like, oh, yeah.
Duh.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be that weird to find supernatural stuff in Reading, because this is exactly the sort of town that like, lots of Stephen King novels are set in, for example.
Yeah. You think so?
This is kind of the type of setting you would come up with if you wanted to say, we have the small town, and then evil crept in,
Right. Yeah, totally.
So,
yeah.
So it wouldn't be surprising.
Well, there is a lot of history here, and probably, given Gold Rush and people spreading out from the Bay Area as workers came in for, all sorts of building projects and stuff like that. So there's probably a fair amount of ghostliness going on here.
The backyard of the place I grew up, there's evidence of placer mining and, graves of miners.
Awesome.
Yes.
Very poltergeisty.
Yeah, which is funny because we just played in that area and actually, for hide and seek, hid in what I now understand to be, shallow graves.
Oh.
And I only discovered that, when I was in college. Oh, really?
That's funny.
Retroactively very morbid.
Right. Yeah, but I don't know. I think we discussed on a previous show if it's morbid and weird, we were drawn to it, so.
This is true.
All right, you are listening to Radio Wasteland. When we come back, we have our guest, Craig Owens, photographer, paranormal investigator, and historian.
And the booze, 'cause tonight we're going to the Anaheim House of Blues.
All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Craig Owens. Craig, do we have you on the phone there?
Yes, you do. How are you?
Not bad. How are you? How's your reception going from where you're at?
Oh, I think it's fine. I hear you guys okay.
Good.
I'm calling from the Queen Mary in Long Beach. So.
Yeah, that's really exciting. We were just talking about it, and let me introduce you first, Craig. Craig Owens is the upcoming author of Haunted by History and the curator of BazarLA.com. Totally worth checking out if you're interested. Bazaar LA is more than just about, it's more just about crazy old stories from the area, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the imagery you have on there.
Yeah, Bazaar Los Angeles actually started as a Facebook page around 2009, 2010, and I was expecting my third child.
Mm-hmm.
So I was grounded at home waiting for that call. So I needed something to do to kind of settle my nerves and occupy my time. And I'd always been hoarding a bunch of old Hollywood stories and Los Angeles history, and obviously I was interested in the paranormal even back then, so I just decided I would just do like a big knowledge dump.
Right.
And I never advertised. I just started this page, and it grew organically to the point where I have roughly around 15,000 followers on Facebook alone. And then Bizarre LA is kind of the best of Bizarre Los Angeles on Facebook, except for I've opened a store, and I hope to get back into more of the exclusive paranormal reports about certain locations in Los Angeles and Southern California.
Right. Well, why don't you tell us what you're doing right now at the Queen Mary? Why are you there?
Well, the Queen Mary is actually one of the haunted hotels that are covered in my book project, Haunted by History. It's actually going to be in Volume 2, which hopefully will be out either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, hopefully by the end of this year. It is Part 2, and what I did is I took 16 hotels, and in figuring out which hotel goes in which book, I did it in chronological order of when the hotel was built or when it opened. So the Queen Mary is probably the newest of the haunted hotels covered. And it was in the mid-1930s when, it first set sail. But the Queen Mary, of course, is one of the most haunted places in North America, the United States. It's very well known throughout the world, not just for its history, but for its ghost history. And there's a lot of confusion as to which is what when it comes to not only the legend of the ship, but also the legend behind the ghosts.
Yeah, you were telling me when last we spoke, you were telling me that the Queen Mary seemed to, on a marketing level, really sort of hesitate pushing the ghosts for quite some time, and then when they did, it worked out.
Well, that's actually what's interesting about the Queen Mary is that, I've been able to trace the ghost stories at least back to the late 1950s, and it's shocking how many of how similar the ghost stories from the 1950s are. There's a similarity to the ghost stories that people are talking about and discussing and even experiencing today. Then when it, obviously it came to Long Beach in 1967 and was docked, and a lot of it was changed between 1968 and about 1971, 1972. And at first, the ghosts became a topic of conversation. Then the city of Long Beach decided that this wasn't such a great idea. We don't really want to talk about the ghosts. So they tried to put a no ghost policy in place through much of the 1970s. However, when
out of here.
the ship opened as an attraction in 1972, what was happening there were a lot of people coming to visit, but they were only coming to visit one time. They just weren't that impressed with the Queen Mary. Much of it had been gutted and was off limits to tourists. They had opened up a Jacques Cousteau Living Sea Museum that did okay at first, but then people tired of it. They wanted to see the old parts of the ship that were long gone. Mm-hmm. And ironically enough, after multiple attempts to jumpstart its marketing, they finally went back to ghosts. And that turned out to be the one marketing strategy that kept bringing people back more than one time. In fact, it brings me back. I mean, I think this is my 10th time on the ship. And if it weren't haunted, I don't know that I would have been here that many times.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I've been there before, and that's why I want to go back. Yeah, isn't there? So when I was there, I was pretty little, and I seem to remember some story. Maybe you don't know this, so I'm throwing this at you out of the blue. Some story about the bulkheads in the front breaking and people dying there, and that was kind of the famous story that was kind of hopping to my mind when I think of the Queen Mary.
Yes, I want to say I don't know the exact date offhand. I discuss it in the chapter. It's a very well-known story. But on one of the trips when the Queen Mary was taking troops to Scotland, I believe, right off the coast of Ireland, oftentimes there'd be an escort that would meet the Queen Mary and more or less take it into port in Scotland, where the soldiers would then disembark. And during one of those trips, there was a ship called the Kurosawa. It was a smaller scout ship, and the Queen Mary was zigzagging, and the other ships were zigzagging. Everyone's zigzagging. However, the Kurosawa and the Queen Mary zigged when they should have zagged, and the Kurosawa couldn't get away from the Queen Mary in time, and the Queen Mary had orders not to stop for anyone, for anything. They had to make it to port safely. And so it ended up splitting the Kurosawa in half. There was pretty high casualties, and the Queen Mary had to just keep plowing through, literally, to get to shore and leave this sinking vessel behind. Men crying out for help. And some of them, I believe, were in time rescued, but once again, the fatalities were high, and this was kept a secret for many years, top secret. And the Queen Mary was badly damaged. It had a big dent. In fact, I have a photo that's in my book of the dent of that happened from that collision. And the Queen Mary made it to port, and then it went back to the United States. And I want to say it went into a shipping yard in Chicago, and they had to repair that front hull before it could sail again.
So do you find that this is one of those stories where a lot of these sightings seem to coincide with this historical event?
Well, that's what people say. One of the first ghost stories to come out of 1967 was it was actually a ship engineer for Cunard. He was an American. And when it was parked at the Queen Mary, he claimed that during his, when he would tour the ship, they had certain people staying on the ship, and they're kind of like curators or security. They just kind of watched out for the ship. They had to have someone on board, even though it was no longer active. And while he was making his rounds late at night, he had heard the sound of creaking metal, men's voices crying out, and the sound of water rushing in. And I believe it lasted about a minute, and then it just disappeared. And he had heard it more than one time, and he started telling the stories behind it to other people. So the story caught traction. Then in the late 1980s, I want to say 1988, Unsolved Mysteries did an investigation of the Queen Mary, and one of the parapsychologists was a man who's no longer living, but it was Dr. Roll. And Dr. Roll, William Roll, I believe was his name, he actually had set up a lot of audio equipment in that part of the ship, and they did capture something that sounded similar to what this last engineer, this crewman, had heard. It was the sound of what appeared to be a male voice or male voices calling out, the clanging of metal, and the sound of water running or entering.
I'm gonna have to try to find that recording so that I can hear it at some point. So Craig, we're coming up on break here, so there'll be a couple few minutes here. I hope you're going to stay with us.
Oh, sure.
All right, and you are listening to Radio Wasteland with our guest Craig Owens, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Craig Owens. We have a lot of guests on this show, and a lot of them deal with paranormal stuff. But, Craig, I think you are our very first guest that has such a strong interest in history, and I have to admit that your wealth of immediate go-to knowledge for these topics is quite impressive.
You were naming dates off the top of your head in that last segment, which, unless you have like a notebook in front of you with just everything you know, is very, very impressive.
Absolutely.
And actually, either way, it's impressive.
It is. I agree. So, I feel like we could probably talk about the Queen Mary all night long, but that's not actually what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about, although it's a part of your book, is your upcoming book, Haunted by History. My wife is very excited. She has been harassing me to get her a copy of this so that she can read it because she's a big history fan. And, I've been kind of curious about the process that you went through to write this book because I know you're interested in the paranormal, you're interested in history and in photography. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, sure. The process that I used, let's see. The best way to probably start is that this all happened by accident.
All the best things do.
I was doing a photo shoot in Riverside at the Mission Inn. I had heard that it was haunted, but I was actually doing a vintage-style silent film photo shoot. Well, something happened that disrupted the shoot. In fact, I had finally saw my first ghost, which I never thought I would ever see. And quite frankly, it was a shadow person, which I didn't even believe in at the time. So I had to reevaluate a lot of things at that point. I was always a believer, but kind of a reluctant one,
That's where I put myself as well, kind of a reluctant believer.
Yeah, and so, the next question is, well, what is it? Why would it be haunting? What was it about that location where I had seen it? And of course, there's all kinds of legends, and which one was true, which one wasn't. I started going to other hotels. Southern California, in fact, all of California, but, Southern California as well, has tons of haunted hotels and ghost legends. Some of them I had heard and that I actually believed. But when I started shooting there, I started renting these haunted rooms in order to kind of test to see whether or not the stories are true or not. So then I went back and I decided to research the history to see if there really was a link between history and ghosts. Is the paranormal nothing more than a piece of history that's left behind somehow and is actually makes itself known from time to time?
Well, I definitely found that interesting about your process because when you explained it to me, I found that really interesting because I've often thought, like, is the paranormal sort of an echo of the history that happened there, or is it merely urban legend that carries on? So when you said that you compared the history to the stories to see where the correlations lie, I definitely found myself drawn to that idea. I think it's a great idea.
If there were any correlations at all, sometimes there's no correlation, and I point that out. Oftentimes, people will want to try to explain why a place is haunted or why a room is haunted. And, a lot of these ghost legends, if you really look at it, they're all built on a kind of a moral value lesson.
Like a cautionary tale.
Don't live this way or this will happen to you. Mm-hmm. Vice gets, is prevalent in a lot of the ghost legends. Suddenly places become brothels when there really is no history that they were brothels.
I've wondered about that. It seems like every place in Reading that somebody says, oh, this place was haunted, it used to be a brothel. I'm just, oh man, there were a lot of brothels around here.
Ladies of the night ghosts are, prevalent, and you start seeing these repeated patterns. So, the question is, well, how many of these are actually true? I mean, it's real easy to jump to conclusions that if this hotel was open during Prohibition, that it had to have a speakeasy, or something to that effect, or mafia, mafiosos took over this place, and the question is, how true is that? And believe it or not, there's enough circumstantial evidence that will usually point you in the direction, well, this could possibly be, or this definitely did not happen.
Right.
And a lot of owners, when they buy these properties, they'll have heard the ghost legends, and some of them actually believed it. So it was quite a surprise when I actually came back to them and provided them with the correct answers. Oftentimes, I found out that maybe the date that the building was built was incorrect. You know, that had been promoted and marketed in the local historians, and, you know, they had long ago thought that, you know, something was built in, like, say, 1897, and then I found out that it was actually built 5 years apart from that date. And these are examples of just some of the fun things that I found and stumbled across through the years of research. So
when you go and stay at one of these places, do you know, I'm wondering what do you take people with you to help corroborate? Do you take maybe somebody who maybe would be considered a more scientific ghost researcher, or maybe a more clairvoyant ghost researcher? Do you try to take people with you?
Well, as far as like psychics go, no, I actually try to stay away from that. Now, if one of the models or someone that I've hired to participate in the photo shoot, if they're sensitive or they think they have this ability, I'm okay with that. You know, I'll listen to whatever they have to say, but you know, it really any impression that they might have, it really has to have some kind of corroboration via history or what some other author wrote, providing that they also provided footnotes that I could, you know.
So the people you take with you are really just the people that you're hiring for the photo shoot.
Yes.
Well, I think that's actually probably the least biased of people that you could take with you to get an experience.
Who are not expecting necessarily to encounter a ghost. Though, this does make me think now, you go to this original photo shoot, you see a shadow person, which I think is awesome, because shadow people are just really cool. But then you go to a bunch of other potentially haunted places. How many ghosts have you seen at this point? I mean, you would think you would rack up a fair few after visiting all of these haunted places.
Actually, no.
Really?
I don't see that many ghosts, and
so really just the
oddly
first
enough, I'm pretty sure I saw one, possibly two, at the Mission Inn on two separate occasions. I always joke that the Mission Inn is the only place where I ever see ghosts. In any place that I've ever been to.
As long as you see one somewhere, that means that they're out there, you know.
Yes, and again, I thought I would go through life being one of those that never saw a ghost. And so it was quite an experience. It's something you'll never forget when it happens. That's for sure. And I think when I got home, I slept with the light on for 10 days. And I was writing everyone I knew that might know anything about shadow people, going, what is a shadow person exactly? You know, does it follow you home?
What was the situation? I mean, do you mind telling us a little bit about that encounter?
Yeah, was it just in passing, or was it...
Okay, what ended up happening is, I'll try to get to it as brief as I can. When I first rented a suite at the Mission Inn, I didn't know that I was renting a haunted suite. There was nothing about anything published online about it. But my first full day there, I heard someone moving around inside the bathroom. I heard women's feet clunking, you know, across the upper floor of the suite that I was staying in. And it sounded like someone dropping coins on a wooden table, one after the other. Bang, 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 bang. But more importantly is after I heard the woman clomping, I was trying to ignore all of this stuff while just trying to send a simple email to somebody. And I finally ended it by saying, I think I've got to go. See you later. Bye. More later. And so I grabbed a recorder. I went up and I actually recorded a female voice, despite the fact that I didn't hear anything over 10 minutes. So that got me perked right then. Then 2 nights later, I switched to another suite, and it was a very popular suite at the Mission, and it was called the Alhambra Mirador. And I could not stand that room. There was something very heavy about it. Maybe I thought I was...
Craig, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're coming up on break. It'll be 2 or 3 minutes.
Pardon?
And I'm sorry to cut you off. We're coming up
Hello?
on break. It'll be 2 or 3 minutes, but I'd like to hear
Hello?
the end of this story. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Craig, I'm sorry that we cut you off for the break there. You were telling us your story about the first time that you experienced this shadow person. We have to pay the bills and go to the stupid commercials.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. That's what I get for rambling.
Right.
Sorry,
No. Rambling is what this show's all about. We got no problem with rambling.
Well, yeah, just to recap, I had already began to experience what I felt was paranormal activity. So I was already having my photo shoot somewhat disrupted, and my mind started wandering about the ghosts. Well, I had moved to another suite on the last night shooting. It was like $1,000 a night suite. It was large and very popular, but something very heavy about that space that made me feel very uneasy, and I never could get comfortable, and I always felt like the shoe was about to drop. The next shoe was about to drop. I don't know where, I don't know when, but I was literally on edge. It made it difficult to actually take photos because I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. Something unusual happened right when we had moved in, and I was under the table trying to hook up the internet to my laptop, and then suddenly we heard the model and I heard a bang really loud from the next room, the main room, the den. And I couldn't see it, but she turned a little pale from what she saw, and she turned to me and said, there was a glass of water next to a plastic bottle of water sitting on a table. The water in the plastic bottle was still, but the water inside the glass was swishing around as if someone had tipped that glass and almost tipped it over. And so we already kind of knew something was up when something like that happened, when the water's disturbed in one glass and then the bottle, it's not disturbed right next to it. So about midnight, after trying to shoot and just having all kinds of struggles, I get a phone call. And so I excuse myself from the suite, and I go out into the courtyard on the top floor of the Mission Inn. And 15 minutes later, I'm walking back across the courtyard, and something catches my eye to the left of me. And it's an open-mouthed hallway that looks a little like a dungeon. It's well lit, but it's all made out of brick, and it's a round, open-ended tunnel. You go through that tunnel and go through a glass door, and you're basically inside the Mission Inn. So I'm looking down that tunnel trying to figure out what caught my eye, and I wasn't really seeing anything that I thought was suspicious at first. It was like, okay, there's shadow caused by the brick. There's no misty things. I can see right through the glass door into the building, and then there's the shadow. And then I went back and took inventory again. Something's bugging me. But when I get back to that shadow to the right, just around the time I started thinking, what is causing that shadow? It suddenly whipped back and disappeared around an alcove. So I had been staring at it for a good 3-4 seconds directly. And it was about 5'2", 5'3". I can't say it looked human. It looked somewhat human-like. It did look like someone in a cowl, which I found out that's a very common observation. That's a very common description of a shadow figure or shadow person. I did not know this at the time, but I thought it looked sort of like someone in a cowl wearing like a Franciscan habit or something. And it moved very fast, but it looked like it had been peeking around the corner from this alcove at me. The only other description I can actually give about it is that what had caught my eye eventually about it was I was beginning to notice that this shadow was blacker than all the other shadows. I mean, it was a very inky, blacker than black color, or lack of color.
That sounds absolutely
the other
terrifying.
thing that struck me is it looked two-dimensional. So it really was what I would call matrixing in reverse, because my brain literally had interpreted it, that is, until it whipped around a corner.
I see.
And so I was standing there like a deer in headlights for about 2-3 seconds. I'll admit that, because I had never seen anything like that before, and I was the only one up on that floor. This was August 2009. It was like 110 degrees, in Riverside during that month. And it was during the Great Recession. So, when I later asked who was staying up on that fourth floor, I was told by the hotel, literally, that I was the only one staying up there. Strangely enough, after I had seen that shadow person, other disturbances continued throughout the night. What was weird is that it kept sounding like footsteps overhead, even though we are the top floor. There's nothing above us. And a couple of times I had actually gone outside of the suite and looked around, because I thought someone's pulling a prank on me. Someone's throwing things onto the roof. But once again, no one was around, and there really wasn't anything that you could throw that would be heavy enough to have made those kind of sounds. That is absolutely
terrifying. I love it. I hope to be in that situation more. I've dreamt of doing what you do and staying in these hotels, and my wife says absolutely no way. So it looks like it's going to be Sean and I. But we're coming up on the end of the show here, and I would like you to tell people how they can get in touch with you, find out more about you, get your book.
Oh, sure. Well, you can find me you can actually order the book through my website. It's bizarrela.com. It's Haunted by History, Volume 1. I believe it should be in my hand by July of 2017. It features 8 hotels, the Hotel del Coronado being one of the well-known ones. I discuss the Mission Inn, the history. I also talk about the shadow figure story that you just heard. Mm-hmm. Then there's the Glen Tavern Inn. I cover a place at Catalina Island. It's kind of a small selection of bed and breakfast and hotels. You can also find me on Bizarre_Los_Angeles on Instagram. And on Facebook, you can follow me on Bizarre Los Angeles as well.
I see. But Bizarre LA is really, bizarrela.com is really a good hub for finding you all over the place, right?
Yes. And I do answer, emails. You can contact me. If you have a ghost story about one of these places, obviously I'd love to hear it. And maybe once we establish a rapport, we can exchange stories.
I would love that. I have really enjoyed talking to you. You've been a great guest. For those who don't know, I've been talking to Craig a few times on the phone coming up to this show, and I swear our phone conversations are as long as this show has been, because we're talking about these great topics and your great stories, and I will definitely be on purchasing that book. And when that book comes out, I'd love it if you came on our show again and we talked a little bit about it.
Well, I would love that.
Well, thank you very much, Craig. You've been listening to Radio Wasteland with our guest, Craig Owens.